I once believed the careful lies people tell themselves could withstand the harsh light of truth. But now I know better. Looking in the mirror that morning, I saw someone who refused to be a footnote in my own story. My name is Caleb Ridge, and I'm 35 years old. Every morning I still rise before the sun to tend to the third-generation farm my father left me. When I caught my wife Mariah with our neighbor Grant Lawson, the man whose fence line I'd maintained for years out of respect, something fundamental shifted inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal, but the calculated nature of their deception that turned my stomach. They'd been playing me for a fool while I broke my back keeping this land alive. I won't be defined by what they did. I'll be defined by how I responded. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I'd been out in that north field since dawn, coaxing the old Massey Ferguson through soil that fought me every inch of the way. By early afternoon, the sun had climbed high enough to bake the cab, sweat running down my back as I finished the last row. My shirt was plastered to my skin, and the ache in my shoulders told me I'd be feeling this tomorrow. That's when I heard it, the snap that every farmer dreads. The tractor shuddered and died right there at the edge of the field. I climbed down and checked underneath. Sure enough, the shear pin had given way, a clean break that would need replacing before I could finish up. Damn it, I muttered, wiping my forehead with my sleeve. I wasn't far from Grant Lawson's place. He kept a decent supply of parts, and we'd helped each other out plenty over the years. That's what neighbors did. His family had farmed the adjacent land for as long as mine had worked Ridge Acres. I climbed into my pickup and started down the dirt road that connected our properties, dust billowing behind me in the rearview mirror. The familiar landmarks passed by, the crooked fence post we'd always meant to fix, the old oak tree split by lightning 3 summers back. My mind wandered to the equipment catalog I'd been eyeing. Maybe next season if prices held. As I rounded the bend toward Grant's barn, something caught my eye that didn't fit. A silver sedan parked off to the side, half hidden by the shadows of the building. Mariah's car. My foot eased off the gas pedal. What was Mariah doing at Grant's place? She'd mentioned running errands in town, something about picking up supplies for dinner. Grant's barn wasn't on that route. I pulled over, the engine idling rough as my thoughts. Maybe she'd stopped to drop something off. Grant's wife had passed 2 years ago, and folks still brought by meals now and then. But Mariah had never mentioned. Then I heard it. Laughter. Her laughter. It floated out from the barn, light and carefree in a way I hadn't heard in months, years maybe. Then Grant's deeper chuckle joined in, and the sound of them together sent a chill through me despite the heat. I killed the engine and sat there a moment, my hands suddenly cold against the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to drive away, pretend I'd never seen her car or heard her laugh. But my feet were already moving, carrying me toward the barn door that stood slightly ajar. The creak of my boots on the gravel sounded thunderous to my ears. I reached the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. Through the crack, sunlight spilled across the straw-covered floor, illuminating 2 sets of boots discarded carelessly. Her sandals, the ones with the little blue flowers I'd bought her last birthday, tossed aside next to his worn work boots. I couldn't see them from where I stood, but I could hear them. Whispers now, soft and intimate. Something hot and vicious clawed its way up my throat. For a moment, I imagined throwing that door wide open, letting them see the look on my face. Would they scramble to explain? Would they even try? But I stepped back, quietly, carefully. The rage inside me turned to something colder, more deliberate. This wasn't a moment for shouting. This was a moment for thinking. Back in my truck, I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing through every late night, every casual mention of Grant's name, every excuse for being away from the house. Had I been blind or just unwilling to see? By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd run through a dozen different confrontations in my head. Each one ended with more questions than answers. I needed to be smart about this, needed to be sure. And there she was on the porch, wearing that yellow sundress she knew I liked, smiling and waving like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just shattered everything. "You're home early," she called, coming down the steps to meet me. "Did you finish the Northfield?" "Shear pin broke," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "I'll have to finish tomorrow." "Well, dinner's almost ready," she said, brushing a kiss against my cheek that I had to force myself not to flinch from. I made that chicken you like. Dinner was a quiet affair. I pushed food around my plate, tasting nothing, watching her talk about her day, a trip to the market, a call from her sister, lies rolling off her tongue as easy as breathing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the kitchen in long shadows, I made my decision. No more wondering, no more doubts. Tonight she'd answer for what I'd seen. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. Mariah, we need to talk. Mariah's hands froze on the towel she was folding. The kitchen light cast her shadow long against the far wall, stretching it into something I barely recognized. Talk about what? She asked, not turning around. Where were you this afternoon? My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She resumed folding, shoulders relaxed like we were discussing the weather. I told you this morning, I was running errands. The towel corners lined up perfectly in her hands. Why? Funny, I said, taking a step closer. Because I drove past Grant's barn and saw your car there. Her head snapped up, but she recovered quickly. My car? A small laugh escaped her lips. Caleb, everyone borrows that path. Maybe you saw someone else's. I know my own truck's shadow, and I sure know yours. The silver sedan with the dent on the passenger side from when she'd backed into a fence post last spring. I'd fixed it myself. She set the towel down slowly, eyes narrowing. You're tired. You've been out in that sun too long. Her voice took on that soothing tone she used when talking to a child. You always jump to conclusions when you're overworked. The gaslighting rolled off her smooth as butter. I'd seen it before. Little half-truths about money, about phone calls. But not like this. Not about something I'd witnessed with my own eyes. Mariah, I said, voice low. I saw you. I heard you laugh. She crossed her arms. You heard me laugh? That's your evidence? She scoffed, shaking her head. Maybe Grant was helping me load hay. Maybe I said something funny. Is that a crime now? I stepped closer. His boots were next to yours. 2 sets on the hay. No loading happening. For a second she froze. Then she scoffed. You're twisting everything. You're paranoid. She turned back to her folding, but her hands weren't quite steady anymore. Maybe you want to think I'd cheat so you can blame me for your own failures. That one hit harder than a slap. My failures? I said. She took a breath, feigning calm. You work dawn to dusk. You don't talk, you don't touch, you just exist out there with your tractors. She gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the fields that had fed us, clothed us, kept a roof over our heads for all these years. You think that's marriage? I stared at her until the silence broke her act. Her voice faltered. Caleb, nothing happened, all right? Grant's lonely? I was being nice. Don't make it something ugly. Something snapped inside me, not like breaking, like clarity. You were plowing him while I'm out there plowing the fields. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from her face. She turned away, pretending to busy herself with nothing, hands shaking as she reached for her keys. You're cruel, she said. I can't even talk to you when you're like this. Maybe take your boots, I said. You left them in Grant's barn. That was the first crack. Her face went white. She muttered something I couldn't catch and slammed the door. The house fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall, my father's clock that had kept time through every season since before I was born. I sat down at that kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared breakfasts, paid bills, made plans for a future that was now dissolving like sugar in rainwater. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Nora Bell's number. Nora had helped us with the property line dispute last year, straightened out the paperwork when Dad died. She was honest, direct, no bullshit. She answered on the 3rd ring. Nora, it's Caleb Ridge. I need your advice. I told her everything, down to the boots on the hay, the laughing, the denials that sounded rehearsed, the car hidden in the shadows. Have you confronted Grant? She asked after I finished. No, just Mariah, just now. She denied everything, then walked out. Good. The word surprised me. Don't confront him yet. Don't threaten. Don't post angry messages online. Don't tell your buddies at the grain elevator. I could hear papers shuffling on her end. Get proof, Caleb. Timestamps, photos of vehicles, bank records, phone records. Don't argue. Document. I looked out the window. The driveway was empty. Mariah's car already gone. Probably back to him. I hear you, I said. Come to my office tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Bring your financials, all of them. And Caleb? Her voice softened just a touch. This isn't the end. It's just a different road. I hung up and stared at the empty driveway, the shadows deepening as night fell completely. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, I just had to breathe. I woke up before dawn the next morning with my back stiff from sleeping on the couch. My mind had kept spinning until 3, replaying every moment at Grant's barn, every denial that had spilled from Mariah's lips. The smell of fresh coffee pulled me from my thoughts. I walked into the kitchen to find Mariah humming by the counter, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, wearing that blue robe I'd given her last Christmas. "Morning," she said, voice sweet as spring honey. She slid a mug across the counter. "Thought you might need this after last night." I stared at her. No trace of our argument showed on her face. No tension, no guilt, just normal. Like she hadn't been caught, hadn't lied straight to my face. Somehow, this performance was worse than if she'd still been angry. "Thanks," I managed, taking the mug. I'd slipped my phone into my pocket before coming downstairs, recording app already running. Nora's advice echoed in my head. Document everything. I took a sip, watching her over the rim. "I'm heading into town later for some parts. Need anything while I'm out?" "No, I'm good." She leaned against the counter, studying me. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said last night. You've been working so hard lately. Maybe we both need some space to clear our heads." I nodded slowly, keeping my face neutral. "Been thinking about our finances, too." "Oh?" Her eyebrows lifted just slightly. "Yeah, harvest payment's coming in soon. Thought we should talk about where it goes." She waved dismissively. "Let's not worry about that now. I've been consulting with—" She stopped herself. "I've been thinking we should maybe separate some of our expenses. For clarity." My heart thumped hard against my ribs. "Consulting with who, Mariah?" She turned away, busying herself with wiping down the already clean counter. "Just a financial advisor. For advice." "A lawyer, you mean?" I kept my voice even. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "I just meant I've been doing some research online. That's all." I nodded and finished my coffee in silence. As soon as she left to shower, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. There it was, 3 withdrawals in the past week, small enough not to raise immediate alarms, but together they added up to nearly $4,000. And there, just yesterday afternoon, a transfer to a card I didn't recognize. My hands shook slightly as I hit print. Each statement came out crisp and clear. Dates, times, amounts. I photographed every page with my phone for backup, then tucked the papers into an envelope. After Mariah left, saying something about errands in town, I called Nora again. "She's already moved money," I told her, "and she slipped up this morning about consulting someone." "That's what I was afraid of," Nora sighed. "She's preparing. Listen carefully, Caleb. First, open a new account in your name only. Second, install cameras, visible ones, at entry points to the house and especially your equipment yard. Make them obvious." "Won't that just make her more careful?" "Exactly. We want a paper trail of her avoiding cameras, not concealing them, and get timestamps on everything, where her car is when she comes and goes." After hanging up, I drove to the hardware store and bought 3 security cameras with night vision. I installed them that afternoon, one at the front door, one at the back, and one overlooking the equipment gate where my tractors and harvester were stored. I was adjusting the angle on the equipment gate camera when I heard a vehicle approaching. Grant's green pickup slowed as it passed, almost stopping. I could see his silhouette behind the wheel, watching me work. Our eyes met for a brief moment before he accelerated away. When I returned to the house, Mariah was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed. "What are you doing with those cameras?" Her voice was ice. I met her gaze directly. "Protecting what's mine." "You don't trust me now?" She tried to sound wounded, but there was calculation behind her eyes. "I trust what I can prove," I replied, moving past her to grab water from the fridge. That evening, we moved around each other like ghosts, careful not to touch, barely speaking. After dinner, she retreated to the bedroom while I stayed in the living room with paperwork spread across the coffee table. My phone buzzed with a text. From Mariah, who was just down the hall. "You'll regret treating me like a criminal." I saved the message, took a screenshot, and emailed it to myself. Evidence. I didn't respond to her text. Just sat there in the quiet house, surrounded by the ruins of what I'd thought was a partnership. "No, Mariah," I whispered to myself. "You'll regret underestimating me." 2 days later, I sat in Nora Bell's office downtown, watching dust motes dance through shafts of morning sunlight that sliced across her oak desk. The old building still had that courthouse smell: paper, polish, and purpose. Nora pushed her reading glasses up into her silver-streaked hair. "Here's what we're going to do." Her voice was calm but firm, the way it had been since I'd known her, back when she helped my father with water rights disputes. "We draft a separation agreement citing adultery as grounds. We offer Mariah the car, her personal items, and a limited stipend to help with transition." "She'll never sign it," I said, leaning forward in my chair. "Probably not," Nora admitted with a small nod. "But offering reasonable terms establishes your intent for the court. It shows you're not vindictive, just protecting what's rightfully yours." I rubbed my jaw, feeling the stubble I'd missed that morning. "And if she keeps emptying accounts? That's why I've already filed for temporary orders to freeze joint assets." Nora slid a document across the desk. "Judge Harmon will likely hear this by next week." She fixed me with a stern look. "Most important thing now, Caleb. Keep calm. Document everything. Make sure any interaction with Mariah has a witness. Can your sister still come by?" I nodded. "Lila said she'd drop everything if I needed her." "Good." Nora handed me a sealed envelope. "These are the separation papers. When you give them to Mariah, have someone there." The drive home felt longer than usual. I passed the turn to Grant's property and noticed his barn door was closed tight, like it was holding secrets. Remember when that barn was just a barn? Just a place where a neighbor stored hay and equipment? Amazing how places change their meaning in your mind. When I got home, I called Lila right away. "Can you and Tom come for dinner tonight? Everything okay?" Her concern traveled clear through the phone. "Need to talk. Both of you." That evening, after the pot roast was mostly picked over, I laid it all out for them at my kitchen table. The barn, the boots, the money disappearing, the lawyers. Lila's eyes welled with anger as I talked, and Tom's jaw tightened beneath his beard. "That lying?" Lila caught herself, taking a deep breath. "I always thought she was unhappy here, but this?" She shook her head in disbelief. Tom leaned forward, elbows on the table. "What do you need from us, Caleb?" "Tomorrow morning I'm giving Mariah separation papers. Need witnesses. People she can't intimidate or twist around." Lila reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We'll be here. What time?" 8. "She's usually having coffee then." Tom nodded solemnly. "We've got your back." That night, I hardly slept. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar sounds that had once meant home, now just the backdrop to a slow-motion collapse. Morning came with golden light and the smell of coffee brewing. Mariah was already at the kitchen table when I came downstairs, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up. "Morning," I said. She grunted in response. The doorbell rang at precisely 8. Mariah's head snapped up, surprised. "Who's that?" "Lila and Tom," I said, moving to let them in. Confusion crossed her face as they followed me into the kitchen. Tom nodded a tight greeting. Lila's smile didn't reach her eyes. I pulled the envelope from my back pocket and placed it on the table in front of Mariah. "These are separation papers. Nora Bell drafted them." Her eyes narrowed as she tore open the envelope and pulled out the documents. I watched her scan the pages, her hands beginning to tremble. When she reached the section outlining grounds for separation, her face flushed crimson. "Adultery?" she hissed, looking up at me with fire in her eyes. "You think you can humiliate me into signing this?" I kept my voice even, aware of Lila and Tom watching silently. "You've already done the humiliating." Mariah's laugh was sharp and brittle. "This is pathetic." She looked at the stipend amount and snorted. "And insulting." "It's fair," I said. "The farm stays with me. You get your car, your things, and support while you get on your feet." She stood so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. "You think I'll walk away with nothing after 7 years?" She tore the papers in half, then quarters, letting them flutter to the floor like confetti. "You'll pay for this, Caleb." I didn't move, didn't raise my voice. "Every withdrawal, every text message, every night you didn't come home. It's all documented." Her eyes darted to Lila and Tom, then back to me. "You'll hear from my lawyer," she spat, grabbing her purse from the counter. The front door slammed behind her a moment later. I knelt down, gathering the torn papers while Lila crouched beside me. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded, more certain than I'd felt in days. "I'm done being blindsided." Tom checked his watch. 8:27, he said. witnessed her refusing and destroying the documents. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Another transfer, this time for $2,000. The trap was tightening, and Mariah didn't even realize she was the one caught in it. Time to pull every thread. I spent the next week turning into a man I'd never expected to be, part detective, part shadow. Every morning at dawn, I'd check the cameras, download footage to a hard drive Nora had given me, and label everything with dates and times. Simple, methodical work. The kind that kept my hands busy while my mind tried to outrun the hurt. Document patterns, Nora had said during our call. Timestamps matter. Judges like timelines they can follow. So I followed Mariah without following her. The cameras did that work, capturing her silver sedan backing out at odd hours, returning well after midnight. 3 nights that week, she didn't come home at all. On Tuesday afternoon, I drove past Grant's place on my way to town. There sat Mariah's car, parked bold as brass in his gravel drive, not even hidden behind his shed like before. I pulled over around the bend, steadied my breathing, and took photos with my phone. Date stamped, time logged. The weight of the evidence felt strange in my hands, both damning and oddly comforting. Truth has a certain solidity to it. "You're doing exactly right," Nora had assured me during our check-in. "Don't confront, don't threaten, just collect." The bank statements were the clearest proof. Mariah had transferred nearly $12,000 out of our joint account in the last month. When I showed the records to Nora, her eyebrows had risen. "Good thing we separated those grain sale payments," she said. "She's building a war chest." By Thursday, I had a folder thick with timestamps, photos, and financial records. Lila offered to drive me into town to file notarized copies with Nora's office. I was grateful for her company. The silence of the farm had started to feel like a physical weight on my shoulders. "You holding up okay?" Lila asked as we headed down Main Street toward the diner. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The lack of sleep was catching up to me. Every night I'd lie awake, listening for Mariah's car in the drive, then pretending to sleep when she crept in. The bell above Parker's diner door jingled as we entered. "Old Mr. Parker nodded from behind the counter, and we slid into a booth by the window. I ordered coffee, black. Lila got her usual, grilled cheese and tomato soup. I was halfway through my cup when the bell jingled again. Lila's eyes flicked up, then widened slightly. Her hand shot across the table, gripping my wrist like a vice. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't turn around." But I already knew. Something in the air had shifted, the particular silence that falls when familiar voices enter a room. I kept my eyes on my coffee as Lila's grip tightened. "It's them," she murmured. "Grant and Mariah." Her hand is on his arm. I could hear their low laughter, the sound of stools scraping at the counter behind us. My coffee cup trembled slightly in my hand. "Let them hang themselves," Lila whispered fiercely. "Everyone in this town is watching now." I set a 20 on the table, enough to cover our meal and tip. "I'll wait in the truck." The walk to the door felt miles long, my boots heavy on the linoleum. I didn't look their way, but I felt their eyes tracking me. Grant's, uncertain. Mariah's, defiant. The cool air outside was a relief against my burning face. That night, Mariah returned just after 11. I was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing documents for the morning. "Where have you been?" I asked, voice flat. She set her purse down, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Out with friends." I said nothing, just gestured toward the small red light blinking in the corner where I'd mounted the camera. "I know." Something flickered in her eyes then. Fear, maybe, or the sudden realization that her little game wasn't as hidden as she thought. She turned away quickly, heading for the stairs. The next morning, I went to the barn early and took inventory. Every piece of equipment that had value, I photographed and documented. Then I changed the padlocks on the equipment shed and the storage barn. New heavy-duty locks with keys only I would hold. Rain started falling as I hung the sign. Private property. Trespassers prosecuted. The droplets turned the fresh paint glossy under the yard light. Thunder rumbled in the distance as I hammered the last nail. Headlights swept across the drive as I stood back to examine my work. Grant's truck, slowing as it approached the gate. I stood motionless in the doorway of the barn, rain dripping from the brim of my hat, and waited. "Come on then," I whispered, part of me hoping he'd stop. "Step out. Give me one reason." But the truck accelerated slightly and continued past. Yellow taillights disappeared into the rain-soaked night. I realized then that the real storm wasn't outside at all. It wasn't the thunder or the rain or even Grant circling like a vulture. The real storm was brewing inside my walls, in the silence between Mariah and me, in the evidence piling up in folders, in the truth we both knew but only one of us would say aloud. 3 weeks later, I was repairing a fence post when the sheriff's cruiser rolled up the long drive. The evening sun cast long shadows across the fields, turning everything golden at the edges. Sheriff's deputy Mike Brennan stepped out, adjusting his hat against the glare. I recognized Mike from high school. He'd been 2 grades below me, played center on the basketball team. Now, he looked uncomfortable in his uniform, like the fabric was too tight around his neck. "Evening, Caleb," he said, hand resting awkwardly on his belt. "Got some papers for you." I wiped my hands on my jeans and took the manila envelope. "What's this about, Mike?" He shifted his weight. "Emergency petition. Temporary protection order. I'm sorry, man." The blood rushed to my ears as I tore open the envelope. Mariah's name was right there at the top, followed by a string of accusations in cold legal language. Respondent has exhibited volatile and intimidating behavior. Petitioner fears for her safety. Threatening presence. "This is garbage," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "You know me, Mike." He looked at the ground. "Just doing my job. You've got to vacate the premises for now. Court hearings next week." "Vacate?" I stared at him. "This is my home, my farm." "Just until the hearing," Mike said. "You can grab some clothes and essentials, but I've got to stay while you do." I felt like I'd been gut-punched. The deputy followed me inside, standing awkwardly in the doorway while I threw clothes into a duffel bag. Mariah wasn't home. Of course she wasn't. I packed my toiletries, medication, and work documents, trying not to look at our wedding photo still hanging on the bedroom wall. 20 minutes is about all I can give you," Mike said softly. I nodded, grabbing my laptop and the backup hard drive with all my evidence. At the door, I turned back, surveying the home I'd poured everything into. "She planned this," I said. "You know that, right?" Mike just shook his head. "Not my place to say. Just follow the order, Caleb. Don't make it worse." That night, I lay awake on Lila's pull-out sofa, staring at the ceiling. The guest room was neat but unfamiliar. Floral wallpaper that had been there since we were kids, a ceiling fan that clicked with every third rotation. Lila had been furious when I showed up with the paperwork, threatening to drive over and tell Mariah exactly what kind of person she is. Tom had calmed her down, reminding her that any confrontation would just strengthen Mariah's case. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Tom had said, clapping me on the shoulder. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mariah's signature on those papers, the calculated precision of it all. She knew exactly what she was doing, cutting me off from my livelihood just as harvest season approached. Morning came too slowly. I was up before dawn, showered, and on my way to Nora's office by 7:30. I found her already at her desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, coffee steaming beside her. "I've been expecting you," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Let me see it." I handed over the petition. Nora read every word carefully, her expression neutral. When she finished, she set it down and removed her glasses. "She's setting up leverage for the divorce," she said simply. "This isn't about safety. It's about forcing you off the property so she can establish herself there before proceedings." My jaw clenched so tight I could hear my teeth grind. "She's lying under oath." "Yes," Nora agreed. "But we fight with facts, not fury. Your anger is justified, Caleb, but it won't help us in court." She pulled out a legal pad. "We need witness statements. Lila and Tom can verify you've stayed with them during arguments before. We'll file a motion to dismiss based on fabricated claims and evidence of Mariah's ongoing affair, which gives her motive to remove you from the property." By noon, we had 3 sworn statements from Lila, Tom, and our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who'd seen Mariah throwing things in the yard during our last argument, not me. Nora filed the motion electronically, and we secured a court date for the following week. "Don't contact her," Nora warned as I left. "Not by phone, not by text. Document everything." That evening, I couldn't help myself. I drove the back road past Ridge Acres, staying on public property but close enough to see my farmhouse. The lights were on in every room, burning electricity I'd be paying for. Through the kitchen window, I could see 2 figures. Mariah was laughing, glass in hand. Grant Lawson stood beside her, drinking what looked like my whiskey from my grandfather's old tumbler. I caught my reflection in the car window, hollow-eyed, unshaven. I barely recognized myself. You wanted to scare me out, I muttered, starting the engine. You just made me come back stronger. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Nora. Court date confirmed. Tuesday, 9 a.m. Be ready. I'd seen the inside of the county courthouse before. Property disputes, water rights hearings, that kind of thing. But walking in as the accused felt different. The high ceilings echoed every footstep like an accusation. The wooden benches gleamed with decades of pine polish, almost hiding the musty scent of old papers and older verdicts. Nora walked beside me, her briefcase full of evidence we'd gathered. I kept my eyes forward, spine straight. The security guard nodded as we passed. He'd gone to high school with my dad. Remember, Nora whispered, answer only what's asked. No commentary. I nodded once. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand. Across the aisle, Mariah sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a cream-colored blouse I'd never seen before, something new she'd bought with our money. Grant sat beside her, too close for neighbors, too familiar for friends. Neither would look my way. The bailiff called out, "All rise," and we stood as Judge Harmon entered. He was older than I remembered, gray at the temples with reading glasses perched on his nose. He nodded to the room and got straight to business. Ridge versus Ridge, petition for protective order, he read. Let's hear it. Mariah's attorney went first, a slick-haired man from 2 counties over who spoke about my intimidation tactics and concerning behavior. He described me installing cameras as harassment, called my quiet anger threatening. As he spoke, Mariah dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. It was a good performance. When it was Nora's turn, she didn't raise her voice or make dramatic gestures. She simply opened her folder. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Ridge's claims are not only false, but deliberately manufactured to gain advantage in an upcoming divorce action. She played the video footage first, clear timestamps showing Mariah's car leaving our property at midnight, returning at dawn. Then the receipts, a shared meal 2 towns over, paid with our joint account. Then the motel records with both signatures. With each piece of evidence, Mariah's mask slipped a little further. Furthermore, Nora continued, we have witnesses to Mr. Ridge's actual behavior during marital disputes. Lila took the stand first, her voice steady as she described the night I showed up at their door, upset but controlled. My brother has stayed with us 3 times in the last month, she said. Each time, he removed himself from arguments rather than escalate them. Tom testified next, confirming everything Lila said. He added, Caleb's always been the peacemaker in any situation. That's just who he is. Throughout their testimony, Grant shifted in his seat, tugging at his collar. The courtroom wasn't hot, but sweat beaded on his forehead anyway. Guilt will do that. When Mariah took the stand, she tried a new approach. The tears came easily now. I've been so lonely, she said, voice catching. Caleb works constantly. He neglects me emotionally. When I tried to talk about it, he got so cold. Her attorney nodded sympathetically. And did this make you afraid? Yes, she whispered. The way he looked at me, like I was nothing. Nora stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Ridge, do you recognize these text messages? On the screen appeared Mariah's own words. If you don't give me what I want, I'll tell everyone you scared me. You know they'll believe me. The courtroom went silent. Mariah's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I was upset, she stammered. I didn't mean, no further questions, Nora said. When it was my turn to testify, I felt strangely calm. The wooden witness chair creaked as I settled my weight. Mr. Ridge, Nora asked, have you ever physically threatened your wife? No, ma'am. Have you ever destroyed her property or blocked her from leaving during arguments? No, ma'am. Why did you install cameras on your property? I looked directly at the judge. Because things kept disappearing. Tools from the barn, documents from my office. I needed to know what was happening on my own land. When Mariah's attorney tried to rattle me with questions about my temper, I simply stated, I never hurt her. I just wanted the truth. Judge Harmon removed his glasses, polished them slowly, then replaced them. The silence stretched like fence wire in the sun. I've heard enough, he finally said. Petition for protective order is denied. Mr. Ridge is permitted full access to his property effective immediately. The gavel crack seemed to echo forever. Outside in the courthouse hallway, the tension finally broke. Nora shook my hand, promising to file divorce papers by week's end. Lila hugged me tight, whispering, I'm proud of you. As we headed toward the exit, Grant approached, hands in pockets, shoulders hunched. Caleb, he said, voice low, Maybe we could work something out. Man to man, I could make this easier for everyone. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope Nora had prepared. "Here's your settlement," I said, handing it over. Grant opened it, his face draining of color as he read the trespass notice and the itemized invoice for the fence repairs he'd promised but never completed. "You can't be serious," he muttered. "Dead serious," I replied. "Just like our friendship was." He backed away, envelope crumpled in his fist. I was almost to my truck when I heard her. "Caleb," Mariah called, her voice trembling, carrying across the parking lot. "We can still fix this." I stopped, keys in hand, but didn't turn around. "You can't fix what you buried," I said. The weeks after the protective order hearing dragged like harvest season in a drought. Each morning, I'd wake before dawn, make coffee in silence, and watch the sun climb over my fields. Some days felt almost normal, until I remembered the empty space at the kitchen table, the legal documents stacked in my office, and the cameras still recording everything. Nora came out to Ridge Acres on a Wednesday afternoon. I cleared the dining room table, spreading out financial statements, equipment titles, and inheritance papers from my father. The farm had been in my family for 3 generations, but paper makes things real in court. "We're in good shape," Nora said, organizing documents into folders. "The prenuptial might be simple, but it's clear about the land. And you've kept immaculate records." I'd never been so grateful for my father's insistence on keeping receipts. Every tractor payment, every acre purchase, all documented with dates that predated my marriage. "What about the money she took?" I asked, sliding over bank statements showing the withdrawals. Nora nodded. "We'll address that. But I have something better." She pulled out her phone, swiping to a series of photographs. "These were taken yesterday." The images showed Mariah's car parked in Grant's driveway, overnight. Another showed them shopping together at the hardware store, his arm around her waist. "Your temporary support agreement specifically states that cohabitation terminates the payments," Nora said, a faint smile playing at her lips. "She just gave us our closing argument." I stared at the photos. Even now, seeing them together still felt like a punch to the gut. Not from jealousy, that had burned away weeks ago, but from the sheer audacity of it all. "You think they planned this from the start?" I asked. Nora gathered the papers, tapping them straight against the table. "Maybe, maybe not, but they certainly planned on you rolling over." I thought about the fields I'd worked since I was tall enough to reach a tractor pedal, the house my grandfather had built, the future I'd mapped out in straight, clean rows. "Not a chance," I said. The morning of the final hearing, I dressed in my best shirt, crisp white cotton pressed the night before. I polished my boots until I could see my reflection. Before leaving, I took the oldest photo of Ridge Acres from the wall, my father standing proud beside the first barn, and tucked it into my wallet. The drive to the courthouse felt different this time. The knot in my stomach had loosened. Whatever happened today, I'd fought with truth instead of shame. Nora met me on the steps, briefcase in hand. "Ready?" I nodded. "As I'll ever be." Inside, Mariah sat with her attorney, wearing a conservative blue dress I'd never seen before. Grant wasn't with her this time. Smart move. His presence would only have confirmed the cohabitation. Judge Harmon entered, and we all rose. The proceedings moved faster than I expected. Mariah's attorney spoke first, painting her as a devoted wife abandoned emotionally by a workaholic husband. "Mrs. Ridge contributed significantly to the success of this marriage," he argued. "She's entitled to half of everything they built together." When Nora stood, she didn't raise her voice or gesture dramatically. She simply presented fact after fact: the prenuptial agreement, the proof of my pre-marriage ownership, the documentation of assets Mariah had already removed. Then she delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, regardless of any other considerations, the temporary support agreement includes a cohabitation clause. As these photographs clearly demonstrate, Mrs. Ridge has been living with Mr. Lawson for at least 2 weeks. By the terms she herself agreed to, support terminates immediately." Mariah's face flushed red. Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear. She shook her head, eyes darting toward me with naked hatred. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully, occasionally glancing up at Mariah over his glasses. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Based on the documentation provided and the clear terms of both the prenuptial agreement and temporary support order, my ruling is as follows. Mr. Ridge retains full ownership of Ridge Acres Farm, all equipment and vehicles titled in his name, and the family home. Mrs. Ridge will keep her vehicle and personal possessions. The spousal support terminates effective immediately due to cohabitation. He paused, looking directly at Mariah. This court does not reward deception, Mrs. Ridge. The gavel fell with a finality that echoed through my bones. Outside, a few local reporters waited, but they asked no questions, just watched in silence as we exited. The only sounds were footsteps and wind rustling through the courthouse maples. Grant was waiting by his truck across the street. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, busying himself with something in the cab. Coward to the end. I climbed into my own truck, relief washing over me in waves. Through the windshield, I could see Mariah standing alone on the courthouse steps, papers shaking in her hands. She built a life out of lies, and the wind just blew it all away. The first frost came early that year. I woke to find the fields glazed with white, like God had draped a thin sheet over the world while we slept. By mid-morning, the sun had burned it away, but the message was clear. Autumn had arrived at Ridge Acres. I sat on the porch steps, steam rising from my coffee mug. The farm looked different now, cleaner somehow, like the divorce had washed away more than just my marriage. The old oak trees that lined the driveway were turning golden, their leaves starting to drift onto the gravel. In the north field, Benny Ortiz was loading hay bales onto the flatbed. He was a good hire, quiet, efficient, respectful of boundaries. He whistled while he worked, some tune I didn't recognize but enjoyed hearing across the distance. Having him around made the place feel less empty. "Morning, stranger." Lila's voice startled me from my thoughts. She was walking up the drive, a foil-covered plate in her hands. "Didn't hear your car," I said, standing to meet her. "Parked down by the gate. Wanted the walk." She handed me the plate. "Cinnamon rolls. Made them this morning." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." We sat side by side on the steps, sharing the rolls and watching Benny work. It felt good having my sister there, her shoulder occasionally bumping against mine when she laughed. And she was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. "What?" I asked, catching her staring at me. "Nothing. Just, you look better. Like yourself again." I nodded, taking another bite of cinnamon roll. The sweetness reminded me of Sundays before church when we were kids. Mom would have a batch cooling on the counter, and Dad would sneak us each a corner piece before anyone else woke up. "The farm feels alive again," I told her. "Like it's breathing." Lila nodded toward the gate where a new lock gleamed in the sunlight, catching the morning rays. "You're not letting anyone in this time," she said. It wasn't a question. I smiled, feeling the weight of those words. "Some fences need better locks." "Heard some things in town," she said, wiping sugar from her fingers. "Grant sold his John Deere to cover some debts. Bank's been calling him about his mortgage." I sipped my coffee, letting the information settle. Not surprised. And Mariah moved out of his trailer 2 weeks ago. Nobody knows where she went, but Tina at the diner said she was heading toward Cincinnati. I stared out at the fields, surprised by how little I felt hearing that news. No satisfaction, no anger, just nothing. "Their little affair didn't last then?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Lila shook her head. "Turns out betrayal doesn't build much of a home." I didn't want to celebrate their misfortune. That wasn't who I was, who I wanted to be. But I couldn't deny the sense of justice washing over the land like the morning sun. When Lila left, I spent the rest of the day working alongside Benny, mending a broken fence post and checking the irrigation system before winter set in. Simple, honest work that left my hands calloused, but my mind at peace. As the sun began to set, I walked the fence line alone. Each post stood straight and true, like sentinels guarding what was mine. Some were weathered, some new, but each one told the story of what I'd fought for and rebuilt. The evening air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. In the growing darkness, the farm seemed to exhale, settling in for the night. I stopped at the far corner of the property and looked across the field, my eyes tracing the neat rows that would sleep until spring. "They took their shot at my life," I said to the empty field, my voice steady. "But all they broke was their own. The earth still turns, the fields still grow, and I'm still standing." I turned back toward the house, now just a warm glow in the distance. The wind picked up, moving through the rows of harvested corn stalks, whispering the sound of quiet justice. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.